Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm here to bring you a Death Parade anime review. This episode takes a break from the classical Judgment game and centers on Dakeem and his characterization. So, if you don't technically like Dakeem, you might dislike this episode, I'm just gonna say. But this episode was really needed for Dakeem. Like, Dakeem as a character, I like his character, I like his persona, but he was very flat as a character. He was. But with this episode, we get a little insight into Dakeem as a character and what he truly thinks about what is going on around him. And we get a little bit of a subplot slowly building up in this episode. So, Dakeem as a character in this episode, it took me by surprise to see the true meaning behind these dummies, these mannequins that he constantly stores in this room, in, Queen Dakeem. We find out that these certain people, like, how we found out, like, 2 episodes ago, when there was a random person sent to be judged by Dakeem, and Dakeem found out it was a dummy. Well, all these people that were kind of fake humans sent to Dakeem to be judged, we find out that those are the exact same people that were turned into dummies, and, dummies turned into humans, and he takes them, instead of having them thrown into, like, a disposer, he takes them, dresses them up as how they once were, and he decorates Queen Dakeem with them. So, he kind of respects the dead of the dummies. Like, I mean, I don't know if you understand what I'm getting at, but he respects the dummies with their death. Because it just shows you Dakeem is very different from the other Arbiters to be able to do something like this. But it's also clarified in this episode that Dakeem, as an Arbiter, he is way different from everyone else. Because we find out that Arbiters cannot have emotions, and they gotta continuously judge people. That's what we find out in the episode. Right at the beginning, literally, we have some just exposition right at the beginning of the episode by that old man that still reminds me of Satan. Still, this dude, Dakeem, we find out that he shouldn't have emotions, but he slightly does. He's starting to treasure things. He's starting to grow emotions, stuff like that. And as this slowly builds up, we get an insight to Dakeem's character of how he respects, the dummies' life, even though they were just taken away in an instant. We also find out about how this place, this judgment place, I don't know exactly what this place should be called. I don't know. I guess it's, on the boundary of life and death. I don't know if I should represent this as heaven or hell, but whatever location this is where all the Arbiters judge people, we find out that people are dying at a faster and faster rate. And this has been brought up once before, I think, on episode 3. And with this episode, it's once again brought up that there's other sections of this facility that are experiencing major issues because of the death rate of human beings. And I feel like this is one of the main issues when it comes to Death Parade, because the actual workload on the Arbiters and other people are getting more and more ridiculous as time goes on. And this really just goes to show you a different perspective of the series, because they stated in this episode there's about 2 people dying per second, 7,000 something an hour, and that's a ridiculous amount of deaths in just an hour. And we see a perspective on one of these fellow workers that actually look like they're in a factory, like they're sorting through crystallized human memories, and they're having to sort through all these dead people, and you just see how they come down these tubes as if it was like a factory. So, what we see here is that we have it where Dakeem is kind of like an experiment. Like, right now, he's been given human emotions, as we could see, and he's actually being experimented on as an experimental judgment device. Because they need to find new forms of judgment to be able to speed up the process of judging someone else. And that is clearly what is going on with Dakeem. Like, Nona, she's experimenting with Arbiters, clearly experimented with Dakeem to be able to discover quicker ways to judge, also, better forms of judgment, stuff like that. And so, the main plot you can get from the series, besides Dakeem and, the main female character, you have it to where people are dying way too fast, and they're trying to figure out ways that they can settle all these deaths in a timely manner. And at first I was thinking like this in this episode. I was like, so all Arbiters and everybody that works in this tower, as we find out, are dummies. They are. But the thing was, like, why don't they make more? I mean, if it's kind of turning into a factory, which it really is, we got to see an example of that, why don't they just make more dummies? I think that's one of the main issues that this series is trying to tackle. Nona doesn't like that. She doesn't like how everybody's turning into like a machine, just, you know, judging people, moving on as if they're a robot, and that's clearly what is plaguing Nona's mind in this episode and probably this series, because she doesn't like the way the judgments are set up and the way it's been handled, because it's just turning into a freaking factory, and, you know, you're looking at everything, you're not really giving the proper judgment on each individual, and every individual should probably be, you know, different. Like, you should handle the situation with each individual person differently. And on top of that, Nona also states that how can we judge people if we have never experienced death ourselves and we cannot understand human emotions? And that brings up a very, very good topic. I mean, in society, in real life, you can't really understand someone's situation or their emotions or feelings if you have never experienced it yourself. And that's true. That is very, very true. You cannot understand someone's situation until you've been there yourself. And that can be said to what Nona stated in this episode. Why can us arbiters judge people, but we have never experienced death and we don't know emotions? And yeah, it kind of seems like it's an unjust judgment since they can't understand what everybody else has been through. So, it's a really cool episode getting to see how this was dived into. We got characterization of Dakeem. We got to find out about Queen. Not just Dakeem, but we found out about Queen, this old arbiter that Dakeem took her place. I like that. I like how this episode showed us a little bit of backstory, stuff like that. And the majority of the episode was flopping back and forth between a flashback with Queen and, you know, the present day with Dakeem and showing his emotions and how he treasures, you know, the mannequins and stuff like that. So yeah, a very simplistic episode, some deep meaning if you look at it deep enough, but that's pretty much it when it comes to this episode of Death Parade. So how do you feel about this episode? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? What was your favorite moments about it? I love you all so much. You have a wonderful day or night, wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.